There I was, surrounded by Canadian game show legends, and just to my left was a host many consider the greatest from any country, Alex Trebek.
Alex Trebek should be on the Mount Rushmore of game show hosts. And he's Canadian, though there is rumor that the mustache was imported.
Alex Trebek is the hero of the Canadian game show hosts because there's a guy who came from Sudbury, much like Alan Thicke came from the Northern Ontario region, to become a huge American star on television. Of course, he didn't start that way.
Alex Trebek started working as a staff announcer on the CBC during his university days in Ottawa. He graduated in 1961 and pretty much did every job that you can think of, news coverage, curling, along with doing variety shows. And so he got his feet wet in everything before anyone had ever heard of him.
Alex Trebek is much more than a game show host. Alex Trebek is an American institution. And it all started in Canada with his work on local shows.
30 minutes ago, the executive or producer of this television show, Weekend, asked me to come out here and talk for 3 minutes on anything.
He hosted panel shows and game shows, the Spelling Bee and things like that.
He was on very obscure Canadian shows, Music Hop, and probably like Mel's Rock Pile from SCTV.
Hi kids, welcome back to Music Hop.
Strategy was another title.
Strategy was a complex, large-scale game show that involved a maze-like set and even booby traps, but Trebek handled it with confidence beyond his years.
Then he hosted Stars on Ice, which was kind of like Battle of the Blades in more recent times. It was literally people skating around. All of these incarnations were parodied on SCTV. You would think SCTV hated Alex Trebek. They loved him, they lionized him, and it was generally Eugene Levy who would play him, and it was always fun.
People, do not wave your hands, use your bells, please use your bells.
I was very fortunate to work with Alex on an early game show that he did. Alex was a very experienced broadcaster already. He worked for years at CBC, drove a silver Cadillac, I remember. He was a very cool dude, very, very great to work with, a real pro.
Alan Thicke was doing some work for game shows down in the States, and he invited Alex Trebek to try out for a 1973 game show called The Wizard of Oz on NBC.
He sort of opened out of town by honing his craft in Canada. So when he arrived in the United States, he was the most precise, buttoned-down guy.
We had to do so much with so little here. He would have to put his finger in so many parts of the pie to make the show work.
They didn't have to train the new guy, I guess.
It was a good school for so many people, and I think in Alex's case, he learned so much here and applied a lot of what he got from Canada to his work in the United States.
When I think about Alex Trebek, I think with most people is the hosting of Jeopardy.
Alex is versatile, which is the reason that his phone was ringing for Jeopardy to begin with.
And if you go on sort of a deep dive into his career, he's done various other things, but he also, something like Classic Concentration was a different show than Jeopardy, and for daytime a little more freewheeling and loose. Same with High Rollers.
In the 1970s in America, he hosted a show called High Rollers, where contestants were rolling these giant dice that were the size of my hands. And Alex was very laid back and very witty and cracked jokes and teased. Just had fun with the whole show.
I don't know why I said that. We're going to pause for a minute. I know they said, you know, do something different for the 4th of July, but you're taking it a little too literally.
Alex Trebek, the stern authoritarian that you're used to seeing on Jeopardy, wouldn't work for a show like that. So you had witty, fun Alex, playful Alex hosting High Rollers.
The double vision will clear up within the half hour. Are you two people ready to go?
Same decade, he's hosting a show like the $128,000 question, which was a revival of the $64,000 question. It's on a dark stage. Alex talks in a very, very dull voice, very, very tense, addresses the contestants on stage as Mr. and Miss, and doesn't really joke around a whole lot because now is the time to build tension because there's a $128,000 jackpot at stake. Being versatile is something that Alex really, really has in his arsenal. He can really deliver a lot of different performances.
After toiling away on various American game shows, Alex got a career-changing opportunity on a show that he would make his own.
I mean, it's Jeopardy. I love Jeopardy.
It was created by Merv Griffin, as everybody knows. I'll give you the answer, you give me the question. How do you beat that? I think is the best format that ever came down the pike.
And Alex has done a number of shows other than Jeopardy, and he is Jeopardy, although Art Fleming was Jeopardy.
When the show was revived, it made sense to find a new host. And at the time, Alex Trebek was in the pool of game show hosts. He wasn't Mr. Jeopardy back then. It was just a show that made sense for him, and he made sense for it. And they chose him, but nobody really believed at that time that he would become so intrinsically identified with that show, and that his personality was so perfectly aligned with the style and the tone of Jeopardy.
He is the modern day epitome of the game show host.
Even though Alex had cemented his place in the United States, he never forgot his Canadian roots.
Back in the late 80s, I was working with some other fellas in another production company, and they were going to do a pilot for a Canadian game show. And I don't know how they did it, but they got Alex to come to Toronto and do the pilot as the host and co-creator of the show. It was a lot of fun working with him. Unfortunately, the show didn't sell, but he remembered me from the first experience that we had together, and he was just a great guy to work with.
He frequently attended events benefiting his beloved University of Ottawa and embraced hosting opportunities in Canada.
My intimate knowledge of him as a person, as a giving human being, as someone who cares, and the way that he's handled the problems with his cancer and how he's been so open and positive.
If somebody else were to say Alex Trebek is the greatest game show host of all time, I absolutely would not argue it. Alex has absolutely earned the right to be called that.
Just the variety of work he's done and his legacy. Alex Trebek is pretty much an authority on all things game shows.
By the very nature of how he performs as a people person, you can tell he loves what he does.
He finds those little openings for humor, which is especially crucial on Jeopardy because he doesn't have that much time. The game is played against the clock.
Well, one of the reasons he's considered the greatest Canadian host, or maybe any game show host, is just longevity. I mean, it's an incredible run. He's been doing it 50 years, if you go back to the Canadian shows, more than that. And on television, if you last 13 weeks, that's a big deal.
36 years on Jeopardy is pretty impressive.
But also he's unflappable, he's very precise.
He is prepared, he's letter perfect.
Diplomatic, gracious, elegant host.
People just like Alex Trebek and always have.
There have been a lot of great game show hosts in the States. Bill Cullen, Bob Barker, Jim Peck, Wink Martindale. For the format for Jeopardy, there couldn't be anybody better.
I just can't imagine any person other than Alex hosting Jeopardy.